Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I am continuing my 5-book Friday series, and I thought for this one I would just do my favorite classics that I have read in 2021, because there were so many that I read and I thought I'll just do 5 and be done with it. Well, it was difficult to do. I'll just say that. I had read a lot of classics and I didn't realize I'd read so many. And being a classic, well, it's classic for a reason, and so these were some great reads. But I did narrow it down to 5 that I want to reread already. So those were ones that I knew were the best of. The first one I read was a book that I had received for Christmas the year before, and so it was one of my first reads for January, and it was The Tenant of Waffle Hall by Anne Bronte. Now, I was just so surprised by this because I had read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and so I love the Bronte sisters, but I had only read Agnes Gray by Anne Bronte. I had heard of this book through Victober. That was it. I had not heard of this when I was in school or anything. And so I was just surprised because it's such a great book. I mean, it's up there with Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, so I don't know why this doesn't get the recognition that it deserves, but it needs to be talked about more often. The reason that I love this one so much is it deals with women's issues during that time period, during the Victorian period, and I'm always interested in women's issues, of course, because I'm a woman, and I love to read about those stories about how women dealt with these things in their time, in their day. And this one does a great job of that. I was just so surprised at how Anne Bronte dealt with the issues in the story. I don't want to say too much about it because the reason I enjoyed the read so much was I didn't know what was going on at the beginning. It's about a lady named Helen who moves to this house that's been empty for a while, and the neighbors want to get to know her and her son, and some rumors start about her, and this friend of hers, this male friend who is interested in Helen, really doesn't want to believe the scandalous things that are being said about her. And so it starts with him writing some letters, but then she gives him her diary, and so you find out what has happened, why she is there, what's happened previously, and her relationship with her husband. And so there's some things that are dealt with that are about abuse and child rearing and alcoholism. All kinds of things are dealt with in this story. That was just well before its time, how it was dealt with. I was just amazed by this story. And if you have not read The Tenant of Waffle Hall, I hope you will. Now, I do say read Agnes Gray first because I think it's underrated as well. I read Agnes Gray first and I really loved it, but I don't know if I would have loved it as much if I would have read this first. So I suggest read Agnes Gray first because there is something that is dealt with in Agnes Gray that is more developed in this story, I think. So that's just my suggestion. If you haven't read Agnes Gray, it's a super short book. Read it first and then pick up The Tenant of Waffle Hall. And then I read during Victober. I had 2 of the best of during Victober, and I'm telling you, if you don't participate in Victober, which is a celebration during the month of October of Victorian literature, please try to mark your calendar for that, because I read some great books every time I participate in Victober. But this past year, I read The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. This was my first Wilkie Collins. It will not be my last. It was so much fun, and so that's why it made it to the best of, because it was just a fun ride. It was a great adventure. It's a mystery about a moonstone that is missing. And it starts off like an Indiana Jones movie. That's how it starts. And it was just so much fun. It had a lot of different people that told the story, and they all had unique voices, and I love that about it. And they were all had quirks about them. It just made the story just so much fun to read. It's just a fun mystery, and after I read this, I started just reading so many more mysteries. So if nothing else, it got me wanting to read more in the mystery genre. So I loved it for that too. But I will be reading more Wilkie Collins in the future because this was fantastic. And then I read also during Victober, and I've already talked about the Moonstone in another video. I'll try to find that, leave it in the cards. And I've also talked about this one, so I won't say too much about it. But Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell. This was so great too. This was my second Elizabeth Gaskell, and this year I want to read all the rest of her works because I loved it so much. Again, it was the women's issues that got me. I just love the way she handled that in this story. It's about a young girl, an orphan named Ruth, who has just not been educated about some things, and she's naive. And she meets up with this guy, gets mixed up with the wrong man, basically. Makes some poor choices and suffers the consequences that you would suffer during this time period because of those choices. It is a powerful story. And I think it's underrated. I think more people should pick this one up. So if you haven't read Ruth, I loved it. And I think I have already talked about this one again. So if I can find that, I will leave it in the description box or in the notes. And then, oh my goodness, I thought Ruth was going to be better than North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, but it wasn't. North and South, you can't beat the couple in this story. Margaret and Mr. Thornton. And it is, they are just, it's like Pride and Prejudice. If you're a Pride and Prejudice fan, and you haven't read North and South, you need to pick up North and South. I read this in the summertime. It was my first Elizabeth Gaskell. And then I was like, okay, I don't know anything about this lady, but I've got to read all her books. So then, of course, I picked up Ruth for Victober. And I already have some that I've picked up on my shelf to read this year. But this story, again, social issues. It's about a girl named Margaret who moves from the country to an industrial town. It's a mill town. And she has a major conflict with the mill owner, John Thornton. And it's about their relationship, but more than that, it's about Margaret and how she deals with moving to this textile mill town, and deals with the workers there. She builds some strong relationships with some of the mill workers. And so she has this conflict with this mill owner and these mill workers because there's a mill strike and all those kind of things. So it has a lot of social issues dealt with in this story too. And it's just a beautiful story. And then after I read this, I knew about the miniseries. So I tracked down the miniseries and watched it, and now I want to reread this and watch the miniseries all over because it's just such a wonderful story. It is right up there for me with Pride and Prejudice, and Pride and Prejudice is one of those books that's on rewind for me. So if you like that kind of story, if you're a Jane Austen fan, you probably would like North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell too. And then finally, and you probably know what this book is. Oh my goodness, this was my favorite read. Not just classics. This was my favorite read of all of 2021. And this just makes my heart swell. It just makes me so happy to even think of the characters in this story. Except for one creepy guy. But the rest of the guys in this story just make me so happy. And that is David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I don't know where I'd be without David Copperfield. This was the most wonderful experience of 2021, reading experience for me for 2021. I want to read it again. I'm trying to wait because I want to read other Charles Dickens first. But I am just so tempted to just start this story all over again. It was such an adventure. I've already done a whole video on 5 reasons to read David Copperfield, so I'm not going to go into any of that because if you follow my channel, you've already seen it and you've probably heard enough about David Copperfield. But let me tell you this, if you have not read David Copperfield, please pick it up. I don't think you'll be disappointed. I just love this story. It is the life story basically of David, and it is so many wonderful characters, so many wonderful things happen, hard things happen, but some beautiful things happen too. And that's all I'm going to say, because I need you to watch the other video so that I don't repeat myself and bore you to tears. But this was my favorite read, not just of classics, but of all of 2021. I loved it. So those are some classics that I read last year. As I was looking through the books that I had read for the year, I was so pleased with what I'd read. Now, of course, I read some that were not so great, but it was well worth digging through all those others to get to these treasures. I loved them so much. So what's on your favorite classics list? What are those books that you've read that you think are the best classics of all time? Please leave it in the comments so I can check that out too. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.